and I run the YouTube channel Celebrate Truth. I came to this topic in April of 2015, but in August of 2015 is when I finally launched my YouTube channel, Celebrate Truth. And it was pretty incredible what transpired after the release of my YouTube channel. It seemed like this topic was resonating with literally millions of people. Over the last 4 years, it's close to 20 million views, almost 150,000 subscribers. I have over 600 videos, and it amazes me how this topic, of all things, are bringing so many people back to the Bible and back to God. It's absolutely amazing. I created different documentaries, but in 2016, I came up with Scientism Exposed. And Scientism Exposed was dealing with the subject matter by allowing people to go on the journey for themselves, to make them think, to make them question, could this be true? Is what this documentary is telling me? And it was really incredible, the response that it had, based on the fact that it has almost over 300 reviews, and it still maintains over 8 out of 10 on the Internet Movie Database. It's a pretty prestigious place for documentaries and movies, and it amazes me just the support and the outpouring of the actual content information itself. In 2017, I released Scientism Exposed 2, a follow-up, in which Rob Skiba, Rick Hummer, many other talented individuals were part of that, and it was my journey following me along. And it was actually interesting because part of the filming of Scientism Exposed 2 was the first time I got to meet Rob Skiba and Rick Hummer and many people that I had been watching a lot online. Rob and I were talking a lot before that, but this was the first time that we were able to meet in person, and it was a real wonderful experience. So that was in 2017. In 2018, I finally released my first book, Scientism Exposed, Hiding the True Creator of Creation. Again, it's on Amazon, and I have all three here with me as well. And the amazing thing with this was that it was a resource to get into people's hands, because it wasn't telling people how to think, it was teaching them how to think of what is coming next, what should we do about all this information being presented. 2019, started up a radio show called Celebrate Truth Radio, and I asked Pastor Nate Wolf to be my co-host. And it's been an incredible journey that we've had with Celebrate Truth Radio. We're almost on our 35th episode. We do a 2-hour radio show every Saturday from 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and we've had incredible guests on. We're looking at doing panels in the future and even call-ins, so stay tuned for that. If I wasn't busy enough with all the stuff that I'm doing with my YouTube channel, my documentaries, my books, in my spare time, I'm the founder and the organizer of the Flat Earth International Conference. And in 2017, I put on the very first Flat Earth Conference. It was in Raleigh, North Carolina, November 9th and 10th. Quickly after that, I put on the very first Canadian Flat Earth Conference. Raleigh was the first Flat Earth Conference ever, and it was the first, obviously, for America and for the world. But shortly afterwards, I launched Flat Earth International Conference Canada in my home city, Edmonton, Alberta. So that was an incredible experience. Last year, put on Flat Earth International Conference in Denver, Colorado. And I'm not sure if people have not been to a Flat Earth International Conference. Some of you have. But if you haven't, it's hard to put into words. But the immediate attention alone that comes from these conferences, I've never seen anything like it. Our first year, we had international press coming from Sweden, Israel, Russia. Unbelievable. And as it continued on, more and more, not just local or international press came out, but everyone wanted to know what was going on. And the amazing opportunity here was that the Bible was being presented. And this was the first time seeing on mainstream news, all of a sudden they're quoting Bible verses. They're putting Rob Skiba on the news, basically saying he's a Bible literalist, and he's sitting there quoting scripture to millions of people. Some of these media outlets have been shown to so many people. We're talking in the millions and millions of people. I was able to see Jake Grant's new documentary, What If the Earth is Flat? And I would encourage you to actually watch it. It just got released yesterday, or actually technically today. It was at midnight that it got released. And it's absolutely incredible. But it actually documents not just his journey, meeting flat earthers, finding out why they believe what they believe, but also documenting all 3 of these conferences. Jake Grant has been to every single one, and it was really a beautiful experience to be able to see everything, and there's a lot of fun in that documentary. I was able to see, there was a session before, and they were showing 30 minutes of it. I found out from Jake that it's actually 2 hours and 40 minutes. So with the 30 minutes that I saw, I'm telling you, it's going to be an enjoyable experience to watch the rest of it, because I was really, really excited with what I saw. This November, I'll be putting on the 3rd annual, it's the 4th annual Flat Earth International Conference, but it's the 3rd annual for the USA. It'll be in Dallas, Texas, November 14th and 15th. Again, it's, Rob and I were with each other, I was at about a month ago, Rob, and we started locating the map and kind of found out fairly close to where you live. It was unbelievably close. So just a hop, skip, and a jump. Just jump in the car and no problem. So yeah, Dallas, Texas for Flat Earth International Conference 2019. Really exciting. But we're here to talk about scientism and the dangers of it. So let's get into it. Because let's see what the Bible has to say about this topic that we're going to be getting into. 1 Timothy 6:20. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. Isn't it unbelievable? Here we find in 1 Timothy, already there's a warning of science falsely so called. What is science falsely so called? I thought science was fact. I thought science was the truth. How could it be something falsely called? How could you masquerade something inside something that was so true? What is science? We need to start with this just to understand exactly what's going on. Science is a method of inquiry, and the knowledge acquired by that method, the scientific method, involves hypothesizing, experimenting, observing, and drawing conclusions. Central to the method of science is that no theory is ever considered final. All theories are subject to scrutiny and re-examination, and it is assumed that all will eventually be proven false by a more comprehensive theory. All right, so there's science. What is scientism? Scientism, on the other hand, is a belief that the methods of science are superior to any and all other methods of determining truth. Science believes things because they have been observed to be true. Scientism believes things because science says they are true. It is essentially a religion where its followers, scientists, worship science, its rituals, and its results. It might come to surprise to most people that one of the most dangerous worldviews one can hold is scientism. And why I say this over and over again is because there is nothing else anywhere in the world that affects every single person. Everyone's worldview is shaped by science. I don't care where you stand on the spectrum, what religion you are, non-religious, everyone is shaped by their worldview, that what science has taught them. But what we're going to find out is a lot that was being taught wasn't science at all. It was scientism. I wanted to get into the brilliant work of Vox Day. I put this up just actually recently. I'm going to show a small clip of it, but it definitely shows that science is in a lot of areas of complexity and also to the point where there's a lot of problems. It's at a critical point, and people are starting to recognize this, not just myself and others. People in other areas are starting to say, wait a minute, something is seriously wrong.
In general, we look for new law by the following process. First, we guess it. Then we no, don't laugh. That's really true.
A lot of people believe that science is a method of telling the truth.
If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong.
But it's not. That's a fundamental category error.
Is math related to science?
Science is just a method. It is not a truth-telling device.
A new study suggests hugging your dog is bad for your dog.
Science is intrinsically and fundamentally dependent upon the honesty and the integrity of the scientist. And right now, whether you realize it or not, science is in a major crisis. And the reason is that scientists have ceased to make use of their own famous scientific method. It's what's called the reproducibility crisis.
So you just have all of these exploratory studies out there that are taken as fact, that this is a scientific fact that's never actually been confirmed.
People who are actually going back and taking the trouble to try to reproduce the results that scientists are reporting as quote-unquote scientific fact are not able to reproduce it. In fact, the majority of the time, the results that are claimed in these peer-reviewed, professionally published papers in reputable journals are false. They cannot reproduce more than 50% of the published science that is tested. And this is the good stuff. And it gets worse. Nature did a poll in 2016. They surveyed 1,500 scientists. They found out that 70% of them were unable to reproduce experiments that other scientists had published. But even worse, 50% of them couldn't reproduce successfully their own experiments.
It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are who made the guess or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
So the idea that you're going to be able to rely upon a method that most of the time is inaccurate and false is ludicrous. When you're dealing with a secular scientist who has tremendous incentive to falsify results, or to simply put a little thumb on the scale, or to make sure that he finds the results that the people funding him want to find, you have a problem.
Man, science will come up with some reason to put in the books, but in the end it'll be just a theory. I mean, we will fail to acknowledge that there are forces at work beyond our understanding.
Let's get into the force that's actually working behind scientism, called the 10 Commandments of Scientism. We've got the theorize, assume, guess, suppose, fabricate, maybe on the human level. But we've got a more spiritual dynamic going on. We've got lies, deceiving, trick, misrepresent, and indoctrinate. I want to start off by number one. Scientism provides society with superior morals. This is what they are teaching when it comes to scientism.
The last thing is culture. Science can provide a culture which is far healthier than the culture that's been provided by theology, because it is based on reality. And in fact, involves morals which are laudable, unlike the morals of all the world's religions, which are despicable, if you read the Gospels.
So believing a scientist just because he's a scientist isn't science. It's a religion, and a religion without a moral compass at that. Remember the understanding that basically the war here, they taught us for the longest time that had nothing to do with religion. This is a religion that is directly opposed to the truth of the Bible and of what God states, even to the very point of morals. Let's get into number two. Scientism is the world's one true religion.
We know that the belief systems of all the world's traditional religions and cultures, their theories of the origins of life, humans, and societies, are factually mistaken. We know, but our ancestors did not, that humans belong to a single species of African primate that developed agriculture, government, and writing late in its history. We know that our species is a tiny twig of a genealogical tree that embraces all living things and that emerged from prebiotic chemicals almost 4 billion years ago.
Again, here we go, when we get into the prophets of scientism. And again, in their own quotes, as you can see, they don't know what they're talking about, but yet they state that this is absolute truth. Let's get into number three. Scientism is obligated to eradicate all other religions.
So all you have to do, change is always one generation away. And we have the children, and exactly. So if we can plant the seeds of doubt in our children, religion will go away in a generation, or at least largely go away. And that's what I think we have an obligation to do.
Lawrence Krauss has been on a campaign going so hard against anything. Should religion be taught in school? And again, this is the big war. They understand the threat of what's happening in the educational system because they have a grasp of it. And anything that would counter that, they've got to deal with. That's why you're looking at all these different examples of something that needs to be dealt with by scientism. Let's go to number four. The concept of an intelligent designed universe is ignorant.
We're left with the realization, of course, that intelligent design, while real in the history of science, while real in the presence of sort of philosophical drivers, is nonetheless a philosophy of ignorance. And so, regardless of what our political agenda is, all you have to say is, science is a philosophy of discovery, intelligent design is a philosophy of ignorance.
So there you are right there. But understand, it's very critical. The Big Bang has never been observed. Evolution has never been observed. Heliocentrism, never been observed. Water sticking to balls, never been observed. Again, they go against the very scientific method that science was based upon. Modern science is a series of assumptions built on previous assumptions. Everything that could prove heliocentrism or the globe have never been observed, tested, reproduced, and validated by the scientific method. It's a godless belief system. Let's go to number 5.
But you know, even more astonishing is that you can get physics, you can get matter, you can get everything from nothing.
They are, because it seems like you should violate some law that, and out of, you know, as classical philosophers said, out of nothing comes nothing. But that's, the interesting thing is that's based on common sense. But as you point out, the world doesn't care about our common sense. And then we've learned that the nothing of the classical Greeks and of the Bible, an eternal empty void, is certainly not nothing, because empty space is a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles. And in fact, we discovered that nothing can weigh something. That's what, in essence, the Nobel Prize that was given to Brian and his collaborators were here for. Nothing actually weighs something. So the whole idea, there's not much difference between nothing and something.
Again, it's unbelievable that people take these guys as credible. I mean, you got Michio Kaku basically echoing the same thing. One theory is that the universe came from nothing, i.e. perhaps bubble universes colliding in a bubble bath. We heard Rob Skiba talking a bit about this, and it's hysterical. Absolutely hysterical. Or perhaps the Big Bang was created by a bubble universe which split into 2 universes. The universe does seem to be compatible with nothing. The idea that basically nothing can weigh something and that nothing is something. I mean, this is the level that we're at in a depraved society where they will take this as scientific. It's one thing to believe this. It's another thing to say this is scientific truth. Let's get to number 6.
Then we saw the sun, and we said, well, the sun is a special thing in the sky. Nothing else looks like it. We found it's just one of all 100 billion other stars in the galaxy. Oh, galaxy's special. No, we're just one of 50, 100 billion galaxies. Well, the universe is special. Well, maybe not. Maybe our universe is one of many. And so there's good historical precedent for the universe having more than one of anything and everything. In other words, the universe, as far as we know, has never made one of anything.
Never made one of anything. Everyone seen this diagram? It's exactly what they're trying to do. Make us with no purpose, no value. And they say this with pride. You've heard different presentators having different documentations of people saying, we're nothing. We're absolutely nothing. Again, this is where Satan uses science to come against any type of value when it comes to a loving creator. Let's go to number 7.
The reason we love science is because it's ever evolving, morphing into more and more discoveries of the world around us. I am thankful that these advances include vaccines.
I believe in vaccinations.
And I believe in vaccinations.
If you don't vaccinate your kids, it can endanger their lives.
The potential downsides of vaccinations are almost non-existent.
The cumulative scientific and medical communities are in absolute full agreement that there is basically no reason not to vaccinate your kids.
No reason.
Again, the scientists, they come in. But let's look at the facts. Since 1983 to 2013, as the advancements of more vaccines, we see a definite increase in autism. As one example, right? We see this continually. Scientism is not just to the universe or to creation. It has basically got its grasp on so many different facets that affect all of us. Let's get to number 8. Climate change is causing an increase in Islamic terrorism.
Absolutely. In fact, climate change is directly related to the growth of terrorism. And if we do not get our act together and listen to what the scientists say, you're going to see countries.
And today is an exciting day because we have a guy with us who has done more, I think, than anybody else in our country to popularize science and stuff like
well,
that.
That's it. So there are people who make a very strong argument to me. These are climate scientists that a lot of the unrest in the Middle East is displaced young men who don't want to work the family farm anymore because the family farm isn't doing as well as it used to because rainfall patterns have changed. They go to the big cities, they can't get jobs, they get disenfranchised, and then they get involved in essentially terrorist operations. Now this...
Terrorism. Climate change causes terrorism. How ridiculous is this? When are people going to wake up? Unbelievable. When you start looking into all these facets, you're going to see that there's an agenda behind each one of them, and they all play a crucial role in everything that we're seeing unfolding in our society and in the world. There's absolutely no consensus. When you start looking into the facts and realize what scientists are actually saying and the debate that's still raging, you find out that the science is not settled on many of these issues that we're talking about. And yet science is used as the validator time and time again. All right, let's go with number 9. Birds or dinosaurs?
Not only are dinosaurs still alive today, but you could easily make an argument that they're more diverse than they ever have been. I mean, living birds are dinosaurs. I mean, just like human beings are a kind of primate, birds are a kind of dinosaur.
Birds, based on the evidence we have, both in fossils and in comparison with living birds, they probably branched off a group of kind of carnivorous dinosaurs we call the theropods, things that are closely related to animals like Tyrannosaurus or Oviraptor, the famous beaked dinosaur, and some of these other meat-eating dinosaurs.
And again, what dinosaurs do is imprint this idea, especially to children. I believe the whole dinosaur thing was really created to basically capture the hearts and minds of children. In the way that space did the same thing. But isn't it interesting that both space, showing the future and the potential of mankind, and dinosaurs showing the past and the regression and where we came from, both aim at children and yet carry on into adulthood. Who didn't love Star Wars? Who didn't love Star Trek, right? Who didn't love Jurassic Park? That was amazing CGI, right? Dinosaurs, space. But again, what's intriguing about those two dynamics is they tell the story to keep their entire narrative in line, that we evolved over billions and billions of years. We're seeing this time and time again. And let's get into like number 10, never question NASA about human space travel beyond low Earth orbit.
Frankly, I have been pushing NASA to revamp its vision. The shuttle did some extraordinary work in low orbit experiments, this International Space Station, moving cargo. But now what we need is that next technological breakthrough. We're still using the same models for space travel that we used with the Apollo program 30, 40 years ago.
What other industry does that fly, where all of a sudden you're using technology, you're destroying technology from the past, and yet you're looking at a situation and saying, yeah, we just really haven't advanced. It's the only technology that's actually decreased in every single level. Let's go and continue on a little bit more about some quotes here with Don Pettit, a NASA astronaut.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But going to Mars should be one of the next series of steps that humans do. The first step should be going back to the moon for a number of technical reasons and exploration reasons, and then after that, Mars, maybe high orbit in Venus atmosphere, maybe going to Europa. There's all kinds of targets to go to, places of interest in our solar system. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
Imaginations is right, absolutely. But here's where it is. The danger comes in the fact that scientism is used to validate the deceptions. And we'll get into a couple here. I talked before about vaccinations, but how do we know that vaccines they don't cause autism? Science, right? What about climate change? I'm with science. Climate change, no hoax. What about this? Professional skeptic ditches science when it comes to 9/11, right? It's always seen as you're not an intellectual, you're not very smart if you deviate from this narrative, because they're always using science as a validator of all these deceptions, not just cosmology. Scientists have discovered that people will believe anything when you say scientists have discovered, right? We see it all the time. Scientists discover this, scientists discovered that. We never, ever really see who these scientists are. We don't really see names. We just take it for what it is. Let's get into the Bible here, Romans 1:18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. So they are without excuse. And yet in the schools, this is what's going on, right? The evolution wars. Should we have intelligent design, creationism? Again, it's seen as a threat to their system continually. If you actually look at the back of the school bus, you can see so many things that are going on with the agenda. I mean, there's so many things going on here. You've got evolution. You got love your Mother Earth, right? You got the ball Earth there, Gaia worship. The fact is, we've got to take care of the Mother Planet because, you know, let's all do our part. You've got the idea of gender, the idea of that there's no such thing as morality when it comes to the sexes, when it comes to marriage. You got pro-choice, kill the babies in the womb, but let's save the whales, right? We've got a complete, absolute reversal going on, and we see this time and time again when it comes to all facets of this world. But again, scientism is the driving force behind each one of them. You get into Planned Parenthood. You get into the whole Darwin here, mocking continually, over and over again. Children are indoctrinated over and over again with nonsense. Perfect for story time, quantum entanglement for babies, general relativity for babies, right? Again, it's funny to think about it, but it's no laughing matter when the fact is they're being indoctrinated from a very early age, and they admit themselves they don't even have a clue what's going on. This is not at all science. And we're seeing this on TV. We're seeing this through so many different mediums. And if it's not bad enough, we're dealing with people that have been raised by these certain scientists in Hollywood and on the television, like good old Bill Nye, the science guy. Well, interesting, kind of like Hannah Montana or Britney Spears, as they're like a nice, innocent, oh, wonderful, let's get our children into them. What progresses in time as you get them involved is exactly what we're seeing now with science, because Bill Nye started off as this goofy little guy, you know, teaching science to kids. No, there's no harm here. He's clean. Well, what exactly is Bill Nye doing now? Bill Nye pushes for the New World Order with scientism. If you've ever seen Netflix, Bill Nye Saves the World, that's the name of the show. I ain't kidding. Bill Nye Saves the World is the name of his show on Netflix. He's got multiple episodes. And it was unbelievable the amount of indoctrination and agenda is in this show. When it comes to climate change, so should we have policies that penalize to have extra kids in developing world? Yeah, I think we should at least consider it. So they're sitting on a panel talking about, should we penalize people for having too many kids? Why? Because it's bad for the planet. We've heard this all the time, overpopulation, which is another lie. But again, it's the scientists that back up this nonsense. But this is really serious stuff when it's on a television show and they're talking about maybe we should have consequences in developing worlds for people that have too many kids. I'm sorry, but what does the Bible say about having children? Be fruitful and multiply. Well, the world wants to decrease, right? This is what we're seeing time and time again. It's an absolute war on God and his standards and his morality. And people need to wake up and see exactly what's going on. And science is the one thing that people never thought this would happen. And it's all merging together. But science was kind of like that Trojan horse that just kept going along, and it had been infiltrated for a very long time. Take sex. We used to think it was pretty straightforward. Now we're realizing it's more like a kaleidoscope. Well, Bill Nye went back and he talked, I think it was in the 80s, about XY. Rob was talking about the chromosomes, what determines a male and a female. And now they'll be on a show talking that scientists are now discovering, like I said before, science discovered there's now 56 genders, right? But they'll say something like that and they will back it up with zero science. They don't care anymore. They don't care because science is it. Science is cool. Science builds rockets and sends us to space. Doesn't matter. It's cool. It's hip. No one cares. No one cares now that basically he's putting programs out where he's talking about basically it's okay, have orgies. It's okay, play around with it's unbelievable that he'll put a children's cartoon in an episode, and it's so raunchy I'm not going to play it. And the reason I'm not even playing these clips is not because I don't want to show you, it's because if this gets live streamed, they'll block the entire video. I've actually done this on my channel. With this show in particular, it blocks it in all countries, even if you use a small little clip. Netflix or Bill Nye or whoever, they don't want this stuff shown at all. Try it if you want to see what happens. You know, you'll just get it blocked in all countries. So that's the reason why you're not seeing these clips here of what's going on. especially with the population control and other things. But Galatians 6:7 says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man soweth, he shall also reap. Right? Romans 3:3-4. For what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? God forbid. Let God be true, but every man be a liar. Right? We see this continually, the fact that God is the truth, men lie. Again, all these theories have been proposed, and yet the world has latched onto it under the guise of, well, it's scientific. We can't debate with science. Science and the Bible, do they contradict? For the longest time, I don't know how many ministries were talking about merging it all together. No, science and the Bible, they work wonderful together and everything. That might hold true if you can find some sort of science that actually holds water with the Bible. And while there might be some really legitimate science that does, I would say that 99% of it does not. And it's very clear, even from the very beginning of the Bible, when you see the two different narratives that are set out. We have the biblical account of creation, and we got the evolutionary long-age speculation, right? Everything is backwards, right? You got earth before the sun and stars. You got the earth covered in water. Whatever. You got all this stuff. Plants created before the sun, moon, and stars after the earth. Now, I'm talking about another area where it's evolution, long-age speculation. But do you know of any other mainstream science narrative where they don't teach that theory? Everything is in the millions and billions in evolutionary. There is no alternate scientific theories. That's it. And it's in direct opposition to the Bible. The Scientism Big Bang agenda. Scientism has its roots in the Big Bang cosmology and evolutionary thought. If humans have evolved by a material, purposeless process, then there is no basis for believing in a God who created us and revealed moral truths or imposing those moral views in any area of our life. Using false science as a weapon, Satan has been able to shoot down the credibility and authority of the Bible. The standard assumption is that science is objective knowledge, while religion is an expression of subjective need. Religion, therefore, must subordinate its claims about the world and whatever science agrees. And again, over and over and over, we kept seeing all these scientists as we were growing up. Albert Einstein, oh, wonderful scientist, wonderful. Over and over and over again. What did he have to say? The word God for me is nothing more than an expression and product of human weaknesses. The Bible is a collection of honorable but still primitive legends, which are nevertheless pretty childish. So here's a scientist saying, I mean, how many children were taught, Albert Einstein, how great, over and over and over, we see this constantly in this direct opposition, and yet we think that science is great. Let's get kids into science. Let's not get kids into science, because the majority of what is being taught in all the areas of science is no longer science. There's not much good science anymore. There's good scientists out there, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying in the mainstream journals, if you basically want to become big in the scientific world, you're going to have to follow suit. You start rocking the boat and saying, hey, my findings are showing me that maybe evolution is not true, you're not going to last long. And we've seen this. Many, many people have been scared to come out. Some people have come out with their findings, and they've lost their job. So we're definitely seeing there's an agenda in place. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn their ears away from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. I thought it's so interesting, because it's not they'll be turned away from truth to lies or to some other, belief, to fables, to nonsense, to fairy tales. I mean, we say fables, fairy tales. This is like science fiction, like ridiculousness, right? We look at the solar system, luring people away from God for 500 years, but probably even further than that. The heliocentric model with its spinning ball Earth is the foundation for a godless Big Bang theory, evolution, and atheism. I will sit there and say that when it comes to atheism or people that don't believe in God, it was scientism that drove them away. Hands down, I have not met an atheist to this day where they said they fell away from God for any other reason. In the sense, it might have been through pain or something at first, but what validated them after a while when they started thinking and coming through to that was, no, that was silly. Science has showed me this is wrong. Again, it is an absolute war from start to finish. You can get into Pythagoras, Copernicus, Galileo. You can get into Kepler. You can run through all these men, and over and over and over, you're going to see some major problems, especially as a Christian, and seeing their occultic, their mystery school ties. It's time for Christians to wake up and at least educate people and say, hey, did you know that these guys are into some weird stuff? Maybe not attack right away and say, hey, science is evil. Science is not evil. Scientism is. Unfortunately, most things that are branded with science, the veneer behind the scenes, peel the onion back, and that's where you find scientism. But even mainstream scientists are starting to see the connection with the mystery schools, with Kabbalah, all this. And they're baffled because they're saying, hey, we're just starting to discover this with our scientism method. And yet this stuff has been going on for a very long time.
I'm a theoretical physicist, and I like to say that I walk in the footsteps of giants like Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. I'm not a philosopher. However, I am rather dazzled by the fact that many of the basic mysteries that we find in string theory and the theory of everything seem to be mirrored in the Zohar and in the Kabbalah.
As a scholar, the most amazing thing of all is the degree to which modern astrophysics sounds like a Kabbalistic text.
When I first made the correlations between Kabbalah and science, I was stunned.
We do know that Isaac Newton had access to certain mystical texts, certain texts of the Kabbalah.
Well, the Kabbalistic description of creation is coming from a single little point, from a speck, and of having matter form and time and space form all together at the very beginning. This sounds very much to me like the description of the Big Bang.
I couldn't believe that the Kabbalists could derive these truths without really knowing any mathematics or physics.
All the things that could destroy string theory, all the things that do destroy every rival theory to string theory, they are all eliminated in precisely 10 and 26 dimensions. These dimensions are magic.
These dimensions are magic.
We physicists don't know where these dimensions come from.
The Zohar says those things. It could have been a lucky guess. I don't know.
It's rather amazing, this uncanny reflection of some of the most advanced cosmology that are mirrored in the Zohar and ancient Kabbalistic texts.
This is very spiritual. It is science versus God. Absolutely, he is using this as a vehicle to come directly opposed to what we're seeing right here. And isn't it amazing that so many people, regardless of their belief system, are all waking up to this? Our ancient ancestors knew the truth of creation because it was clearly seen. They didn't have all the different lies and all the different mediums that were trying to tell them otherwise and saying, well, yep, it feels pretty still. Nope, you're spinning, you're wobbling, you're flying through the universe. Again, you've got to actually go against your senses to believe most of what scientism is teaching. This is exactly the depiction when you take a literal interpretation of the Bible. And while I challenge people sometimes to say, look, as an example, why don't you try it as an experiment and look at all the creation verses and take them in a literal interpretation? What happens? Do things get weird? No, they actually all come together based on the Hebrew cosmology and all the ancient civilizations. That's what's fascinating about it taking a literal interpretation. It's not a big mess. Everything fits together. The pillars fit together, the firmament's there, everything was, you got the Hebrew cosmology, but also when you start looking at Egyptian and other cosmologies, you're seeing this echoed over and over and over again. Satan knew that if he could take out the credibility of the Bible right from Genesis, he could take it down. He could take people away from the Bible and from God. We're seeing it over and over again with verses talking about that the earth doesn't move. 1 Samuel 2:8, 1 Chronicles 16:30, over and over, it's stable, it shall not be moved. Again, people knew that this earth doesn't move. God knew it didn't move. We were taught otherwise. But over and over and over again, you have a consistent theme. But let's just see what real true science will tell us about the movement of this earth. When the Bible over and over, it's actually interesting, out of the movement, over and over and over, I think it's 14 times, it says it's still, stationary, fixed, over and over. It's like, how many times does God have to say it over and over? It's one thing, if it's once. And you're like, okay, maybe. But when it's over and over, different verbs to actually explain it, we're dealing with something that's interesting when it comes to the scientific method. Because when you apply the true scientific method, everything fails. You have Aries failure, right? Starlight moves, telescope remains stationary. You got Michelson-Morley, no rotation of Earth. You've got Sagnet, right? You got Michelson-Gale. All of these experiments prove that no, the Earth, they could not detect the movement of the Earth. This is true science, ladies and gentlemen. These are the ones that basically they didn't like. So what did they do? Came up with the theory of relativity. Let's go into crazy nonsense where we're getting into quantum matter and black holes and all these things where, Michio Kaku, explains that they're off by a factor of 10 to the 120. It's the largest mismatch in the history of theory and science. So there is a big crisis happening, and people are waking up. And what's so amazing is so many people are waking up to this. When they discover the lies of scientism, and again, NASA falls into that, all these different areas because they're using science. when they realize they've been lied to, people are running back to the Bible. You don't know how many people I've talked to. Atheists have been they've sat on my couch, and in a split second, they were agnostic. In a split second, they were searching it out. And I'm saying not everyone instantly becomes a believer in the God of the Bible. But again, they're on that journey. They're no longer atheists. But so many people are being led to the Messiah, to Jesus, to Yeshua. They are leading them in numbers like I've never seen. I've been involved in ministry for over 20 years, mainly evangelism. I've done street ministry. I've done prison ministry. I've done so many witnessing, because part of my life and what was imparted on me was the love of Christ, and to be able to let everyone know truly that there's hope and that God loves them. So I use that as an avenue, but I've never seen anything this profound that get people drawn back to God. It's absolutely incredible. Let's get into Genesis, because we're talking about the foundations that Satan has been attacking. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters, which were under the firmament, from the waters, which were above the firmament. And it is interesting when it comes to the firmament, because how many times did we read Genesis and we just skipped over the firmament? All of us. It's just like, it's interesting how supernatural in like 2014, 2015, firmament just basically became a blinking highlight. It's just everyone just stopped on it and said, what's going on here? And instantly started looking at different theories that were proposed, like canopy theory, that basically all the water came down and stuff like this. But then you've got books afterwards clearly saying that water still exists. It's up there, if you're going to take a literal interpretation of the Bible, and it is indeed water. Hopefully we're not at a point where we're going to actually start saying, well, that must be allegory or poetic. Water's water. But again, it would not surprise me if we get to a point when they're actually debating stuff like this, because that might be poetic. It's a very dangerous, slippery slope. We get into Genesis 1, 16 and 17. And God made two great lights, and the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. What does it clearly say here? And God made two great lights, right? The greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. Two great lights. Well, we've been taught that one's a light, and it reflects all these sort of things off the moon. But over and over, you see it in the Bible where it says it will not give off her light. The moon will not give off her light. The moon is feminine. The sun is masculine. It's very clear. You can go into the Hebrew. You can go into the Greek. You can go right to the originals. You can find out this is very clear. A child can understand this. But yet, they have used science to make it all sophisticated, like you need to grow up, you need to become adults. Funny how, space is cool when you're a kid, but then as an adult, you still love space or science fiction. Well, wait a minute, we're supposed to grow up. Why is it that they're introducing us things as childhood, and yet we continue on? Right? It's very clear when you see the sun and you see stars, they're two different things, but we're taught, nope, everything's just, one great star, and there's all these millions of stars, and everything is flipped upside down when it comes to what God clearly says. He said he made one sun and one moon. Period. That's it. There is no 5,000 suns. I don't care what anyone says if you're going to follow the Word of God. It's very, very clear. If you take a P900 or a P1000, zoom in on a star, and look for yourself. And it's interesting because the Bible even explains they all have different glories. They were all named. Another fascinating thing about stars is they all are individually named. Right? You don't name all the trees individually and give them all specific names, every one of them in a group, but every single star is different, kind of like a snowflake. It's incredible. And it's showing God's glory. It's showing God's majesty when it comes to these things. But let's get into Isaiah 14:14. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Anyone know who that is? Yeah, exactly. It's Satan. Satan is the one that basically wants to ascend. He wants to go up. And we're going to get into this ascending because there's a lot of ascending going on right now. Supposed like in the 60s and 70s to the moon. And, they're talking now about going to Mars. And I think Elon Musk is now talking about nuking Mars. That's the latest thing. He wants to nuke it. Anyways, so we got Isaiah 14:14. But it is interesting when you get into Psalms 115:16. The heavens, even the heavens, are the Lord's. Even the heavens are the Lord's, but the earth has he given it to the children of men. Maybe that's not our dominion. Maybe that's not our territory. It's very clear when it's spelled out right there, talking about the earth he's given it to men. We're not supposed to go up. We're not supposed to go into the heavens and all of that. The Bible is very, very clear. You can get into this. I get into the greatest achievement and fraud. This is the one thing when it comes to mankind's greatest moment. And I'm going to propose the fact that possibly in the great deception that would come, they needed a deception in place that would affect future generations by something that would ascend into the heavens for possible the great deception to come down from the heavens. And again, this is one that affected everyone when the event took place, but it is very pivotal on what took place next.
60 years ago, when the Russians beat us into space, we didn't deny Sputnik was up there. We didn't argue about the science or shrink our research and development budget. We built a space program almost overnight, and 12 years later, we were walking on the moon.
Roger, 11. I've just been vectored to another monitor, and sure enough, the browns are coming in a lot more distinctly on the IDA4 that we have up on our screen in the control center. Over. Okay, world, hold on to your hat. I'm going to turn you upside down.
Earth, first step foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
A sound stage in New Mexico.
That never happened.
Let each man say what he deems truth, and let truth itself be commended unto God.
That's from my documentary Impossible, and it's impossible to find on YouTube now. They've literally shadow banned it so incredibly well. It's unbelievable. It got deleted. They had problems with it. Then it got completely deleted. And then the good news was they reinstated it. But try to find it. So if you actually go to my channel and Celebrate Truth and you go to my documentaries, you'll find it that way. But try to search for it and find the original video. You can find a couple mirrors of it here and there, but it is impossible. It's actually kind of fun to try to see if you can actually locate that video. It does not exist. Maybe because it's over 1.2 million views. Maybe there's something in it that is a little bit revealing. Not sure. But again, it's been all over the map. They deleted it. They've actually reinstated it. And it was almost like when I appealed it and I made my case for it, they appealed it, but they've appealed it in such a way that you cannot find it at all. It's gone. It's really intriguing. I mean, they had it to a point where all of a sudden you couldn't search it. They had removed all the likes, the comments. But again, let's get into just all the different connections with the space program. I'm going to move a little quicker here because we will be running out of time here soon. If you look at basically the rockets, you get into the obelisks, you're seeing a lot of things, connection with the pagan gods. Everything when you're seeing in space, there's some shady stuff going on. You're getting into the Nazis, all the different forefathers, all the connections with the Nazis, Wernher von Braun, Operation Paperclip. Again, this should be a warning sign for anyone that's a Christian saying, hey, NASA's good, we should look into it. When you find out they all have really sinister beginnings. November 16th, 1945. They're being brought over. Again, this is fact. And you're seeing these people and you're like, what is going on? You know, when you see Aleister Crowley and you see Jack Parsons, Ron L. Hubbard, Wernher von Braun, and Walt Disney, and you take the combining of all these men together and you find out some interesting things that are happening. But Aleister Crowley, for example, was considered the wickedest man in Britain. I think he was kicked out of the country. He was so wicked. And he's the patron star and saint for rock music, Hollywood movie, the elite. It's unbelievable. And yet now you see a connection with NASA. Jack Parsons admitted to sex magic, praying to Pan, the god Pan. But this is the beginnings of NASA. And many, many presentators have done a lot of fascinating work on space and on NASA, Paul on the plane. Other people have gone into this a lot deeper. I'm going to basically talk about just the dangers of scientism. I want everyone to understand that there's so much going on in so many different facets, and all these areas really do affect us. We see the connections, like I mentioned, with like Jack Parsons. You know, basically, he was a renowned occultist. You know, JPL Laboratories, all this stuff, there's connections, Freemasonry, you see it. All you have to do is the research, and you see it over and over and over again. And you're like, wait a minute, something is up. But let's get out of NASA. Let's get into those good old private companies that, hey, they're not government. They're not part of NASA. Well, don't be deceived, because SpaceX gets a lot of money from NASA a year. I think it's like $4 billion, or I forget what it was. It's a huge figure. And again, the car idea that people were believing that a car was launched into space. Last time I heard, I think last week, it had just done one full orbit around the sun. That's what they're teaching, right? But then you have him at a press conference coming up. He says, you can tell it's real because it looks so fake. No kidding. That's what he says at a press conference, the very first questions he's asked. And he's looking at it and he's like, huh, you can tell it's real because it looks so fake. He's looking at it, and he's just, I mean, who says that, right? Again, sometimes it's almost like part of the laws, the standards that God puts down is stuff has to be released. People can't just be kept in the shadows. Stuff has to be released where people at least have an opportunity to go, I'm going to use my brain. Wait a minute, something's up here. You know, something's wrong. But Elon Musk is so mysterious, he actually took his kids and actually started his own school called Ad Astra. Nobody knows what's going on there, but it means towards the stars, involved in the occult, all sorts of different connections. But even mainstream have no idea what is being taught to his children in his own school that he created. That's messed up. And it's one thing to homeschool. It's one thing. He created his own school to teach his kids, and it's all secretive. What's going on? But no joke, in 1952, Wernher von Braun wrote a book called Project Mars, which imagined that human colonists on Mars would be led by a person called Elon. What are the chances? What are the chances of that? You want to get into chances, you're talking the probability of something being written in 1952, so happened to be the leader in this colonization of Mars called Elon? What kind of name is Elon anyways? Does anyone know an Elon? I don't know. It's a very strange connection going on with what's happening with space and what they're teaching us. The connections with Disney, getting into Wernher von Braun, I look at this as very fascinating. It's almost like, could it be that this was a deathbed confession? Could it be that he puts on his tombstone Psalms 19:1? And what does Psalms 19:1 have to say? The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Again, back to the firmament. And that's a real triggering topic and idea for a lot of people. But a lot of people that are basically now up on stages or doing videos or even talking about this topic came down to the firmament. It really, really shook things quite significantly. We see CERN with Shiva, the god of destruction. All branches of scientism have been infiltrated. There is no good science anymore. This idea that there's good science organizations and all this. If they're in the mainstream and they're working on secret projects trying to create the Big Bang in a collider, maybe something fishy is going on. Maybe we should be careful, and what's going on. There's a very spiritual agenda behind everything that we're seeing in mainstream science. You get into NASA, you get into JPL, you get into CERN, you combine them together and you research them, and with all the points, you start comparing them to the Bible. And again, it's direct opposition. It's complete opposition to the Bible, time and time again. But what's happening as we're progressing and we're getting into the end of the age, and as things are progressing, everyone with morals, what we're seeing just with the desensitization of what's going on, we're seeing something happen that's really incredible. Because we're seeing things come to the forefront that would have never been shown 50 years ago. We're seeing it come clearer and clearer and clearer. Scientism is Satanism without the robes. It's something that basically is masqueraded as a prestige thing. Scientists, wear a white lab coat and you're respected. Try it sometime. Wear a white lab coat, have a clipboard, and people just take you serious. You're a smart dude. That's all you got to do. And again, you can deceive people, and they've been deceived for a very long time. At some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that have seeded onto perhaps this planet. I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the detail of biochemistry, molecular biology, and you might find a signature of some sort of designer. And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Again, they're getting into this now, and this is what's bringing up to basically the big deception that I believe is coming. And then shall the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume in the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him who's coming after the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders. What kind of lying wonders are going to convince the world, basically, of this deception? And I do submit that scientism, having a worldview, will make it easier to be deceived. I'm not saying it is the deception, but I'm saying you will fall for this a lot easier if you're holding on to a scientism worldview. You will now see exactly all different branches, not just science, but all branches echoing the same thing of what possibly could be coming.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Okay, and you've heard presidents be talking about this. So this is a president. Let's now go into scientists and see what they're saying.
I'm wondering if there can't be an upside to all this. I'm a big fan of the original Star Trek series, and it was only when, there were alien civilizations that seemed to challenge the Earth that you found that the Earth got its act together for the kind of global governance that all the visionaries say we need that if we're going to deal with climate change, if we're going to deal with all the modern issues, global finance, where the sovereignty of individual nations is actually a political barrier to solving these big problems. So can there be an upside to the alien threat?
Believe it or not, when President Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev, we now know during the transcripts of the meeting that he said that if we were ever attacked by the Martians, you and me, the Soviets and the capitalist U.S., would be allies in the fight against the Martians. Well, that's how Ronald Reagan looked at it, and believe it or not, there's some truth to it. If we are faced with a common enemy in outer space, it would indeed help to unite the Earth, just the way Ronald Reagan said.
So let's get into some more modern day scientists. Let's get back to Bill Nye.
It's extraordinary, but not crazy to suggest that Mars was hit with an impactor through what's generally called a Hohmann orbit, an orbit where it falls toward the sun but ends up on the Earth. You and I are descendants of Martians.
Okay, and that's not
crazy.
And that's not crazy? Is it crazy that you and I are descendants of Adam and Eve?
We are descendants from a common ancestor. I don't
But
know
is
that
it crazy
that
God made the first man and woman and we're descendants of them?
For me, there's no evidence of that.
So is that crazy?
But I wouldn't use that word.
What would you say?
It's you're betraying your intellect. You're not using your head.
So you're saying it is crazy?
It's frustrating.
Which is more crazy, though.
But you're saying we're descendants of Martians, and that's not crazy?
I say it is not crazy. It's extraordinary, but not crazy.
Okay,
and
so
we have a process by which we can prove that. That's what's so exciting.
Prove that we're Bill, I want you to do that for all these young people. Prove that we're descendants from Martians.
I can't prove that right now. I
thought
don't know where
you
you
said
were the last minute and a half.
I thought you said we could.
We want to send spacecraft there.
Okay.
We have a process by which we can make this discovery.
Okay.
So all this stuff is connected. You can get into it timing with NASA.
Big Bang cosmology.
Oops, sorry.
And
I would say that right now I'm going to play a clip from Scientism Exposed 2, and I believe that Rob really summed this up well, showing how this connection was coming together. And understand that basically what we're being taught in science class with the Big Bang, even the Big Bang, it falls right to the root. We were looking at evolution big time a lot in Christian circles where we were attacking the branches of this tree, but we needed to look to the root. And really, when you follow it all the way back, you find out that you needed this entire worldview, basically not just for that purpose, taking people away from God, but also preparing them for the God that's to come to deceive them.
Big Bang cosmology, in my mind, is what made it possible. It's what made evolution even remotely plausible. And if evolution is remotely plausible because of the Big Bang, then ipso facto, it could have happened elsewhere. That's the whole idea. Is the conditions were right, that our Earth spun off into a perfect orbit at the right Goldilocks distance from our sun and the size and age of our sun, that we're in the perfect zone that life was made possible. And if that could happen here, stands to reason, the odds are, if there are all those zillions of stars out there also have planets around them, then very likely other worlds could have evolved some form of life in a similar fashion. Okay, well, now that they've realized that intelligent design is real, when they look at them in the microscopic level, this isn't possible. There's too much intricate design here to have happened by random chance. So there was an intelligence behind this. But we've already ruled out God. We don't believe in God. So it must have been an ancient scientist that made this happen. So therefore, those ancient scientists who initially created this petri dish that is Earth may come back to visit us. That's the narrative. So you have a massive increase in UFO activity. Along with that, you have a massive increase in documented cases of people claiming to be abducted by some sort of non-human entity, taking them into a laboratory environment and doing sexual experimentation on them. UFOs are obviously some kind of vehicle coming from elsewhere, so it stands to reason in that scientism paradigm, it came from another planet. Could they be of the ones that created the experiment that made us be what we are today in the first place? What I see in the future, it seems like the writing's on the wall. An event's going to happen, Independence Day style, maybe wiping us out, or maybe just showing up and saying, hey guys, we're your creators, we're back. Wow, look what you guys, kids, you've really kind of messed this place up. We're going to have to clean it up, we'll help you out. And, maybe shows like V had it right. Where these alien entities show up, claiming to be our creators, offering mankind all kinds of benefits. Let's give you clean energy. Let's eradicate cancer and disease, and you're going to live 500 years, easy. That's all wonderful. Oh, by the way, we have an enemy. We believe he's on his way. Now that we've helped you guys out, will you help us against him? Then you find yourself in a Revelation 19:19 scenario where the armies of the world are gathered together to make war with the one who's going to be coming on that white horse. You read Psalm 2, the nations of the world conspiring together to make war with God. This is in the prophetic biblical narrative. That's already written in there. The world is going to gather together to make war with God. In my mind, the setup has already been in place for hundreds of years, but definitely within the last several decades of our lifetime. This ancient alien narrative is being put in our face.
This is the end game. This is exactly where it's all culminating. Satan wants to unite the world to go at God. The Great War is coming. And I can't think of a single thing that would unite mankind together where they would be able to address all the issues of what scientism is telling us that we're trying to actually solve. Getting into diseases, getting into climate change. And I believe that the deception, they will have the answers. They will have the miracles to solve all these problems. But understand that it's Satan that is behind all of this. And so many people are being led away from God and the Bible because of science and scientism. And it's time that we address it and we take it very serious because, again, many, many people are falling away based on the lies that they are teaching continually in the classrooms and the educational systems. And it's time that we take it serious, that we have resources, that we get and engage with as many people as possible because the stakes are very high. They're incredibly high when it comes to what devastation it does to people and their faith. In closing, this isn't Satan's first rodeo. Look what else he's convinced the world about. The stars and planets control your destiny. Worship the light bulb, the sun. Worship the nightlight, the moon, right? Make demigods and worship them. You evolved from, wait for it, rocks and monkeys. The great cosmic burp, the Big Bang made everything. There is no designer or creator or savior. The Bible is just a book of fables. There is no hell. Again, continually we see it over and over again. But what is God, what he's pleading with us? He is completely pleading and pleading. Have you not known? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? He that understands the foundations of the earth, is it he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants therefore are as grasshoppers, that stretches out the heaven as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in? And again, back to 1 Timothy 6:20. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. And again, you do err, not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of God. It's time that we come back to the literal interpretation of the Bible. It's time that we stand on the truth. It's time that we do not fear man. We do not fear ridicule. I don't care about you, but I know about me that I'm going to basically take a stand, and I don't care if the whole world laughs. And we need to have that idea that what is so bad about saying, I want to stand on the literal interpretation of the Bible, that every word is true. If God says it's up, it's up. Whether the world tells us it's down. They love twisting things and reversing things and disorientating us, teaching us that we're spinning and wobbling and we're dizzy. But the fact is we're not. We can be still and know that He is God because we are at rest. We are still. And He would not create a wobbling, spinning, chaotic universe and planets if He was asking us to be still. How can you be still? The world is still. It's not a spinning ball. We've been lied to. It's time to open the deceptions, to reveal the truth of what God is wanting to share with all of us. It's clearly able to be seen throughout creation. He's given us mind. He's given us senses. He's also given us the Spirit. But remember, in this battle for truth, no matter what, greater is He that is in you than he who is in the world. Thank you very much.
preview. Okay. It's very surreal to be standing up here, to even just be here. It's been almost a year since I was fired. And so I want to just introduce myself because it's important for how I'm going to end this lesson. Hello, my name is Nate Wolf, and on September 14th, 2018, I was fired for truth. This is my testimony. It's also the testimony of my family, and all 5 of my family members are here with me tonight, my wife Jennifer and my 4 children. But more importantly, this is a testimony about the Father's power and the Father's plan. This really isn't about me. And you know, I've always been the type of person who was a true